Our groups will focus on the Barkindji community. The Barkindji community is in the rural New South Wales. It's worried that their culture may disappear because dry conditions and low flows threaten the future of Menindee lakes. For more than 4,000 years, Barkindji community lives, hunts, and inherits their history and culture on the shore of Menindee area. Now, the river is dying up due to low water flows and the water pollution caused by exploitation of upstream irrigation and drought. The water level is at its lowest level in history. Drought continues to ravage the area. The native animal and plants are beginning to disappear from the riverbank. Many spiritual significant cultures are also disappearing. Scientists warn that the current ecological environmental condition of Menindee lakes will lead to ecological disaster. So on our main focus for this presentation are the ecological consequences of drought and the distress caused by the decline of river relation to the Barkindji culture. We will be touching on the reason for the lack of water in the Menindee River. Also, what has been done so far in response to this emergency, and the effectiveness of those responses. For this site analysis, we'll first talk about the location of Menindee. The Menindee area is located on Darling River in southwestern New South Wales. It is about 200 kilometers upstream of the confluence of the Darling River and the River Murray. The nearest city is Broken Hill. As we can see, if an emergency response to be formed in Menindee area, Broken Hill will prove to be an important section for transporting goods and people to Menindee, because there are very few trains and transportation from Sydney to, and it takes about 15 hours to reach to the site. Next, we will talk about the climate condition. According to the statistics from Australia Government Bureau of Meteorology, Menindee has a disaster climate with a low average annual rainfall, and the region often has several months without rainfall. However, occasional heavy rains may result in more than 100 millimeters of rains in a day. The last record of this situation was in January 2011. As a disaster climate region, the average summer temperature is extremely high. The most recent record summer high is about 48 degrees, was set on January 25, 2019. The precipitation and the temperature data shows that all of Menindee has the highest rainfall of the year in January, but it is often with the persistent extremely heat degrees. This will reduce the flow of nearby river, increasing the low flows in the riverbank. Topography. Based on the topography data obtained from the primary research, according to the Menindee topography map from topographymap.com, a 3D digital topography map of Menindee was generated by the SketchUp software. From this, we can draw some conclusion about the advantages and the disadvantages of the Menindee region from the secondary research. According to the 3D model, we can see the high difference between Menindee and Broken Hill. We can find it is not very difficult to transport goods downhill from Broken Hill to Menindee. But the exposure winds at the site are evaluated to be moderate. In the diagram from the Australia Bureau of Meteorology shows that the most significant winds in the area come from the south. According to the topography map, there is no shelter or planets in the south to protect against this wind. Because of the flat terrain, the area is vulnerable to wind erosion. Protecting wind erosion may be an important measure to maintain the viability of marine Darling Basin, and the local flora may be able to demote the impact of erosion on the region.
Barkindji tribe, also called Barkindji, is located in New South Wales, in Australia. The Barkindji people live along the Menindee River. Their territory is about 20 to 30 miles along the Darling River. According to Norman Tyndale, they live in an area of approximately 7,500 square miles. The Barkindji tribe neighbor is Mara. The Barkindji people have lived in the Darling River for tens of thousands of years. They call the river Barka and call themselves Barkindji. Their agriculture is animal husbandry, and their food comes from the river. The Darling River has brought them rich resources, and they have many kinds of plants, which is also their source of income. They use these plants to make canoes, handicrafts, and seasonings. They will use wood as a shield or hunting tool. Birds provide abundant protein for Barkindji people. For the Barkindji people, the Darling River is the mother river. Barkindji people are good at carving and painting. Their artistic styles are diverse, including painting the kangaroo skins and emu eggs, wood carving bowls, shells, fish, birds, and so on. They also use plants to weave baskets. They are the traditional arts of Barkindji. Well, in this part, I will introduce the emergency response of Menindee area. Well, there are three main causes of Menindee drought. The first is the weather. Menindee has a desert climate, and there is too little precipitation throughout the year. Secondly, the uneven distribution of water resources by the government has caused too much upstream irrigation water and consequently insufficient downstream water. Thirdly, colonial influence. After the Europeans colonized, they only paid attention to economic benefits and ignore ecological protection. So all of this caused the drought in the area.
So, what is the ecosystem consequence of the Menindee area? I will talk about endangered species on Mary Darling River. So, what caused a fish death? There are a number of factors contributing to the mass fish death. The first one is the prolonged high temperature causes a moisture layer, which causes the oxygen content of the water to decrease. The second one is under other weather conditions, the temperature suddenly drops. The kind of hypoxic water mixed in the water consumes oxygen below this threshold, required for fish respiration, which will lead to fish death. Also, because of the low rainfall, less water flows into Northern River, and high rates of evaporation has led to the death of fish from thirsty. Finally, the over allocation of water resource in the catchment over the years, perhaps meaning too little allocation of water to indigenous. And moreover, according to our secondary research, the ecosystem of the Menindee Basin is being destroyed. So the flood circle system that depends on this nature is disappointing. According to history records, in the surveys conducted in January 2000, at least 305 species of terrestrial vertebrates, including 34 species of mammals, 206 species of birds, 56 species of reptiles, and 9 species of frogs have been found from Lake Menindee.
Is facing the problem of disappearing. The Barkindji people have lived in Menindee River for more than 40,000 years. This river carries their culture, economy, and spirit. There are 4 main reasons for the disappearance of Barkindji culture. Firstly, since the colonization of Europe, they have paid more attention to the economic benefits brought by nature resources, and they didn't consider the culture and the power of the indigenous people. Secondly, the poor management of country's water resources caused the irrigators in the northern part of the Menindee River to take excessive amount of water, like cotton farmers, causing the Barkindji people live environment to deteriorate. Thirdly, due to the dry weather, the river has dried up, and some indigenous culture handicrafts need to be woven with local vegetation, so it is difficult for them to find reeds that can be woven, which will lead to the disappearance of indigenous culture. Last is the drying up of the river makes it difficult for Barkindji children to obtain information about their culture, such as finding animals in the river or plants by the river.
Finally, the ongoing potential environmental dangers on the Menindee River. According to a study from 2007 to 2009, 36 count fish that were tagged result in 25% of the death rate related with hypoxic black water event. The black water event is identified by the organic carbon content of dissolved oxygen in the water, and their metabolism consumed dissolved oxygen, which can kill fish. The black water incident caused several serious fish deaths in the Menindee River. This event usually come up with floods happens after prolonged droughts. Also, bushfire can caused by dry weather in summer. The fire will also affect the lives of local people and ecology of the river. That's because after the fire, the plants will enter the Darling River and apply the nutrition to the river bottom, causing a situation similar to the Blackwater events. The Aboriginal people accept the unequal treatment on water rights. So basically, water is bought and sold in the water market. For example, when the rainfall is heavy, people with water license can buy water resource from the government at a lower price. Then, in this area, there is a little precipitation and it is profitable by selling the water at a higher price when it is dry. However, this water can be allocated in the market only if the buyer is willing and able to pay. Many people who depend on water for survival are dissatisfied by the way the middleman profited from water sales. From research, according to Australia colonial history and the practice of excluding indigenous people from land holding rights, in allocation of water rights before the upper limit of water withdrawal and the separation. This means that today's indigenous people are largely excluded from water holding rights. So water is bought and sold. It is hard to prove it is harder for poor and a vulnerable community to buy enough water. In addition, according to an important study on water rights in the Menindee River, Aboriginal people own less than 1% of water rights in Australia. According to a research from Griffith University found that the water right of indigenous people in part of UNSW basins cover 0.2% of overall available surface water, and that indigenous people in this area account for about 10% of the population. The group as such as Lower Darling River Indigenous Nation have become compulsory as long as of indigenous community in water market. The Lower Darling River Indigenous Nation use existing water trading system to ensure that the water rights of indigenous community along the Murray River are used for basic culture and environmental conservation purpose. They buying and managing water resource on behalf of indigenous community in the southern part of Menindee Basin, using funds from governments, environmental agency, indigenous and cultural organization.
Emergency response be improved. Firstly, the government needs to provide financial support and provide technical guarantees to ensure the progress of the project. Secondly, in order to avoid language barriers when communicating with indigenous people, you can use body language or draw to communicate effectively. Thirdly, the local community needs to understand the indigenous culture and their real needs so that the community can provide information to the emergency team. Finally, this project takes time to implement, so the local drought problem cannot be solved quickly.
Menindee is in an ecological and cultural crisis. The decline of river means the decline of Barkindji culture, because they themselves are spiritually connected with the river. The Menindee community face many problems such as ecological disaster, bushfire, and droughts. And because of its location, it is difficult to obtain emergency service when emergency happens. Also, the unfair use of water throughout the state destroy the ecosystem, and the coastal river drying up. Although the government has a variety of strategy to help marine dwelling places, but they are often affected by poor planning and the bad consequences. The Barkindji community cannot take care of the river as they have done for thousands of years. So for Menindee and the Barkindji people, this is indeed a tragic and unchanged emergency for their community.